president tonight took to social media to call the impeachment inquiry a coup. He told his followers they're coming after your guns, your religion, your military, your rights as a citizen. This morning, he demanded to interview and learn everything about the so-called whistleblower. Just for clarity's sake here, whistleblowers, by definition, are to be protected. Over the weekend, there was this gem. If the Democrats are successful in removing the president from office, which they will never be, it will cause a civil war-like fracture. Then there was this last week, captured on camera at the United Nations, obtained by Bloomberg News.
I want to know who's the person that gave the whistleblower, who's the person that gave the whistleblower the information? Because that's close to a spy. You know what we used to do in the old days when we were smart, right? The spies and treason, right? We used to handle it a little differently than we do now.
With us tonight to talk about it, Professor Timothy Snyder of Yale University. Professor Snyder was a Marshall Scholar, educated in the Ivy League and at Oxford, specializing in Europe and the Holocaust. He happens to be the author of 2 books of note in this area, On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century, and The Road to Unfreedom, Russia, Europe, America. Professor, welcome back to the broadcast. Thank you for coming in. I want to read you some of the work tonight of our friends Robert Costa and Philip Rucker over at the Washington Post. As the impeachment drama has unfolded over the past week, a series of disclosures has illuminated President Trump's command over key federal agencies, revealing how he has compelled them to pursue his personal and political goals, investigate his enemies, and lend legitimacy to his theories about the 2016 election. Trump's moves underscore his transformation as president. He arrived in Washington a neophyte, uncertain about how to operate the machinery of government. But now, in his 3rd year in office, Trump has grown confident about exercising power, disposing of aides who acted as guardrails, and elevating those who proved their loyalty by following his orders. Professor, what in there speaks to your thesis?
Well, there are 2 fundamental issues here. The first is the president of the United States is supposed to execute the laws. It's his job not to put himself above the law. It's his job to know what the law is and to execute it. That's fundamental. The second great danger here has to do with the facts and the truth. What we're seeing is someone who began his career as president of the United States by saying lots of things that were untrue. Now we've moved into a new phase where he's operationalizing these untruths. He's making other people repeat them. He's sending the Attorney General and others around the world to spread a fictional version of what happened in 2016. This is frightening because it's so familiar. This is what authoritarian rulers do. This is what a cult of personality means. It's what you think and feel. It's not the truth that matters. And this is where democracy starts to tilt into something else, which is rather scary.
The book 1984, after all, starts with the clock striking 13.
Mm-hmm.
How many times a day do you, as a consumer of news and information, see something, hear something that fits neatly into one of your 20 points in your book on tyranny?
Well, you're describing my entire experience of life, Brian. That's what life is like for me. I mean, I'm a historian of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s when everything went wrong. And if you're a historian of democracy, you know that democracy usually fails, and you're aware that people are vulnerable. You know how important institutions are. And that's why this week is such an important week, because this week is about the clash between institutions and personality, between law and someone who regards himself as above the law.
Is it recoverable? That's what most people want to know. Patriotic, normal, everyday American citizens who don't feel like they chose a side in this. Is it recoverable? As I asked somebody sitting where you are this week, is it like the hacked off arm of a starfish? Will it regenerate?
Not on its own. Not on its own. It's a mistake to imagine that everything was good in 2016. It wasn't. If it were, we wouldn't be where we are today. It's a mistake to imagine that the institutions will just bounce back. They're only going to bounce back if we force them to bounce back, and it's going to require more good work. There are hopeful signs, though. I mean, everything we're talking about, we know because of the good work of journalists. If we're going to come back, it's going to be because we know more rather than less about Mr. Trump. It's because we have more rather than fewer investigations. It's because we return to a place where we're not just repeating over and over again what the president says and contesting it, but know more about the world around us. So journalism is a place to recover.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.